525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in a life? Tonight, we're not measuring a year. We're measuring how do you measure a life. My friend Tom Denton, a retired pastor in New Bern, reads several papers each morning, and he clips obituaries of people he does not know. There are about 10 of us on his mailing list, and he sends us interesting obituaries. One fellow had in the obituary that he was valedictorian of his elementary school. President of the Elvis fan club, and a devoted connoisseur of Texas Pete. We're not here to talk about Michael and Peggy's obituaries, but we are here to speak about how these lives have impacted ours and countless others. I met the Hesters in 1980. I was a young campus minister up at Mars Hill University. Steve Shoemaker was a young pastor over at Beverly Hills. We were all pretty broke, and we got together, the three of us, roughly about once a month. Steve had in the church the fellow who opened the first Chick-fil-A in western North Carolina over at the mall, and he gave Steve a handful of Chick-fil-A free coupons every week, and that's where we met, with free coupons to eat. We dispersed in the early 80s. Michael and Peggy went back to Louisville. Shoemaker went to Louisville, and I went to Ecuador. And we were all separated for a while, but fast forward, in 1989, I relocated back to Lenore, and in 1990, I had the word that the Hesters were back in Asheville. I came up to visit as quickly as I could. And the house was a wonderful house, but those who remember, at first there was an interesting neighborhood around the house of assorted people. I remember turning down the street, and there were these three young women waving at me. They were unusually underdressed. And I proceeded down the street, and there was a car pulled over with a guy leaning in the window, and it looked like they were doing some kind of business. I wasn't real sure. I pulled into the back of the house and wondered, does Michael know the 3 rules of real estate? Location, location, location. We now know that there was a vision for that house. And we know now that that house has been a beacon of light and hope for so many. Soon, Michael became the 911 for First Baptist Church of Lenore. I think I was invited to speak tonight because I've probably referred more people to Michael Hester than anybody else. And in the 32 years I have referred people, I never had a person come back who said, I don't think that's going to work for me. They understood that Michael had the technical skills and the understanding of psychology and health, but he also had the spiritual depth and the genuine Christian compassion that would help them. And he became the person I went to on a regular basis, and the person Janice and I went to on a regular basis. After my wife died 5 years ago, I came and Michael and I spent several hours in the bunkhouse, allowing me to cry and holding my hand. As I thought back about our church, there was an adolescent whose brother at 16 years of age was killed in a car wreck. And this young lady was 13, and she went off the deep end. And finally, I suggested that we make an appointment to see Michael Hester. She saw him through her adolescent years and 4 years of college. 4 years ago, I conducted a wedding for this young woman, and she asked me to send a picture to Michael Hester. 10 months ago, she had a baby. And now she is doing her internship at a facility for young people who have crossed the lines with the laws of the nation and who need to be safely in a place where they can be protected and helped. And she's doing an internship in helping those young people who are now where she once was. And every time I see this young woman, she says, "How is Dr. Hester? How is Dr. Hester?" In 2008, when the economy faltered and failed in many ways, it hit our little community hard. We are furniture central. And some of the family-owned factories and businesses have been bought out by corporations. And corporations do not have souls. And suddenly, there were a bunch of men in our church in their 50s and early 60s who were out of work. One was called on his cell phone after 30 years of work on his way to an appointment and told to come back and empty his desk. I brought 7 men to Sabbath rest. First thing we did was hike around that famous circuit up the ridge and then down through the pasture and acknowledging Ferdinand the bull and back to the old tobacco barn where the chapel now resides. And these 7 crushed men who were losing hope began the process of building their lives. I'll see most of them tomorrow in church. There are many more stories, but Michael's story is not fulfilled without Peggy Hester, a woman of grace, charm, honesty, and hospitality. A woman who can feed cattle, deal with stubborn mules, tend to horses, feed and protect the chickens, and love on at least a minimum of 3 yard dogs at a time. A woman of deep spiritual insight with a poetic gift of writing. A woman who welcomes the stranger, ministers to the poor and the aged, and isn't out to impress anyone, but seeks to know God in honesty and truth. She, too, has blessed me so many times with her words of wisdom and a simple meal of soup and bread. And there have been times when I sat around their table that I suspected that Jesus was there with us. So thanks be to God for Michael and Peggy Hester, both of whom have been my pastor as well.